Welcome. So I'm so excited for today's workshop. For those that are joining for the very first time, normally what we do on the full moon typically is we have a full moon circle where we do a ritual. It's always different. I always intuitively download a ritual where we do ofrendas to the moon, an offering, we do an exercise. We do different things just depending on what I feel the collective needs. But for this one, we're going to shake things up a bit. I think it is so important for us to know the work that we have to do. And I think sometimes we get excited with doing rituals and coming together, but we sometimes forget about the work or what the work looks like or what going inward looks like. So I just wanted to make sure that I'm touching base on this. We've also been receiving a lot of questions lately on the moon cycles. It seems to be coming up a lot. We've got a wave of new listeners. And so I want to make sure that us as OGs, all the OGs, if we just revisit it, I think it's important. Also, I've learned so much since the Moon Cycle series, and then also to show support for our sisters that are joining Let There Be Luz, the collective energy now, and how we can support them with any questions or clarify any confusion. Because I know that the Moon Cycles, the series itself, it takes a few times. You have to listen to it a couple of times. There's so much information that's power packed that sometimes it can get a little confusing. So I thought this workshop would be really beneficial in helping to answer a lot of those questions. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to go through a presentation, and as soon as I get through the presentation, I'll go ahead and open it up for questions. So if you want to write down any questions that you might have so that I can answer, I don't know that I'll have answers for everything, but I'll definitely try my best intuitively. And then I also wanted to let you know that my energy level might be a little low. It's because I'm currently fasting. So I'm about to hit the 48-hour mark, and these first 3 days are a little tough for me. And so I just ask you to bear with me and my energy level. So let's go ahead and get started. So our moon cycle, this was one of the most life-changing pieces of information that, what is that? I don't know what that is. That's interesting. Okay. This is one of the most important pieces of information that I've received, I think, throughout my entire spiritual journey. One of the, I think, going back to knowledge that really shifted me, the first one was return to the sun. Your return to the sun when you turn 27 years old. If you don't know what that is, I would like to invite you to look that up. We're not going to go into it now, but that was also a powerful piece of information for me. And so the second piece, I think, that really shifted my perspective and allowed for me to come closer into myself was the information on the moon and how our menstruation lines up with the moon cycles. I think that this is important information, and now that I've been practicing it and I've been manifesting from the perspective of understanding how powerful this is, I can see why the patriarchy made it its mission to cover this information up, to make us hate ourselves during this time, because it is extremely powerful. And I could see how how men could fear that power. Okay, so the red tent is a spiritual practice that would take place in ancient times. So during this time, both men and women made red tents priority. You could read the earliest documents. You could read about the red tent in the Bible during the book of Jacob. Sarah, Jacob's wife, acknowledges utilizing the red tent. And then you can also read about it through other cultures. It was known as like a moon room. They would call it different things, but it was the time to acknowledge the new moon. It was a big festivity, a big party, cakes, but also it was a time when women would then retreat into the tent. They would leave their homes. They were no longer to care for their husbands. They were no longer to care for their children. Their sole job, I guess you could say, during this time, their sole intention was to tap into their intuition. Men agreed that women had the undeniable power to speak to God during this time, much more so than any time during the month. So it was a very sacred time. And of course, like the blood itself, being able to create children and create life, this was a time that was really honored. So what would happen is the women would go into the tent. You weren't allowed into the tent until you started bleeding. So as little girls, you would just see all of the women go into these tents, and you can imagine excitement that would take place as you're a little girl and you can't wait till it's your turn to enter the tent and find out what happens in there. What do they talk about? What do they do? You can almost feel the magic of what it was like to menstruate. To literally have a party every month you're about to menstruate, to honor it, for men to support you in every way, your fathers, your brothers, you know, your husband, like for everyone to collectively support you. It was a completely different experience from what we are currently experiencing now. Men would actually stand guard of the tents at night just to make sure that women were protected and they were able to tap into their intuition, speak to God, channel in privacy amongst themselves. And of course, like teach the powers and have teachings with the younger women that were just entering the tent as well. So there was also, I don't want to call it hierarchy, but you honored, you know, the elders in the tent. And I think a lot of that is lost today. I think, you know, I believe that it's also part of like the patriarchy taking away women's power and teaching them to honor youth. And I believe that we're missing a lot of our power because we don't honor our elders and we don't honor older women that have gone through experiences and can teach us based on what they have experienced. So the Red Tent was a really important event that took place. And again, this was something that only happened on the new moon. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is the white moon cycle. And we're going to get into all of the phases, but what I want to do first is just clarify the white moon cycle and the red moon cycle. So the white moon cycle, that can be really confusing because it happens on a new moon. So the moon is dark, but for whatever reason, it was named a white moon cycle. I think that's why there's a lot of confusion on whether someone is white or someone is red. So that's something to just take in mind. So the white moon cycle is someone that bleeds with the new moon. When you're bleeding with the new moon, you are a direct reflection of the phases of the moon. So you're bleeding and going through the phases that I'm going to explain to you in a little bit alongside the moon. The moon goes through all the 4 phases as well. And so when you're bleeding with the new moon, you're going in unison with the phases. So typically when women are on the white moon cycle, it's a lot easier to flow with because you're like going in sync with the moon, as opposed to being on the red moon cycle, you're kind of opposing the moon. And we'll get into that in a little bit. So women that are aligned with the new moon are extremely fertile. This is an ideal cycle to get pregnant and create babies. So a lot of the times what I tell my clients that are looking to conceive is to try and align themselves with the white moon cycle, because it's going to be a lot easier. It's not that you can't get pregnant while you're on the red moon cycle. It's just that because the moon controls so much of the gravitational pull of the water, it's also controlling us. And so it's easier for you to get pregnant on the full moon, because that's when you're ovulating. So the energy that embodies the white moon cycle, the energy that comes with it, is the mother phase, which we're going to get into, the virgin phase, the yang, which is actually masculine energy, and the light. The next cycle is the red moon cycle. This is the cycle where women that are bleeding on the full moon. So if you're right now, if you're bleeding with the moon, you're a red moon cycler. And if you bled about 2 weeks ago, you're connected to the white moon. So when you're in sync with the energy of the moon, so you're in sync with the energy of the full moon, but you're not in sync with the energy of the moon itself. So while you're in your wise woman phase, the moon is in the mother phase. So you're opposing the moon. This red moon cycle is really important, most especially during the times when there were red tents, because during the red tents, like I mentioned, women weren't allowed to like cook, they weren't allowed to tend to their husbands, they weren't allowed to do anything. But the women that are red moon cyclers, they were taking care of the women that were bleeding. They were the ones that were taking care of attending their needs, doing any healing that needed to be done, any shamanic work, any intuitive work that needed to be done on the person's body. This is what the red moon cycle would serve their purpose for. So a lot of the times what happens is that some women will stay white for a really long time and then slowly transition to red later on in life. It just depends. So that's why it's so important for you to track to see where you are. And we'll get into those details a little more. So like I said, women that are aligned with this cycle are labeled as healers, shamans, and intuitives. And they're not necessarily in the space or energy of creating babies, but they're more so in the space and energy of creating creative babies. So like businesses, projects that you might have. This is like the energy that the moon is giving you. This is when to do it. This is when to execute any creative babies that you might have. The energy of the red moon cycler is an enchantress, wise woman energy, and it's the yin, which is actually, yin is tied to the feminine energy, and it's associated with dark as well. So you see there's a balance there, because yin is typically associated with light, and it is, but it is also in terms of light and dark. The entire red moon cycle embodies dark energy, which when I say dark energy, I don't want anyone to feel weird. If you do feel weird about that, I want you to explore it, maybe write it down and explore why dark scares you, because dark is such an important part of who we are. It's our shadow work. It's going to be what really propels you into becoming your full self. If we're constantly trying to hide the dark, we're not embodying who we could potentially become. And that is detrimental to who you are and what your gifts are and how you're supposed to serve in this lifetime. A staggered moon cycle. So someone that is not bleeding on the new moon and is not bleeding on the full moon. What can this mean? This can mean a couple of things. Some of it can mean that you are on hormonal birth control. So hormonal birth control, you're not experiencing the phases. And that's so hard to say. And it's also, I think it's hard for me to say, because I don't like the idea of excluding anyone from what's taking place, but I also think it's really important to bring awareness surrounding this. If you take any type of hormonal birth control, then you aren't experiencing the phases. It means that you're not really menstruating. The blood that is coming out is not, it's not real period blood. So you're not ovulating, you're not experiencing any of that. I have an episode on that if you want to look into that. I believe it's like episode 4 or 5. It's called The Pill. But it's important to take a look at that. Also, if you have an IUD, the IUD that has hormones, which I think is the Mederma, the copper IUD, you're still having menstruation, so you are experiencing the moon cycles if you're using the copper IUD. Other reasons why the women might stay in a staggered moon cycle, meaning they're not aligning to the new moon or the full moon, could be because there's not enough artificial light. There's too much artificial light, and you're not exposing yourself enough to moonlight. So before, it was like really common for every woman to start new moon or red moon for some, but to be either or. And that's because we were solely dominated by the energy of the moon, versus now we have all this artificial light, so our bodies are confused, which is why it's so important for us to acknowledge the moon. You don't have to do a full ritual, but I think going outside under dark moon or new moon, full moon, is important because it triggers your system. And you know, it's a really great opportunity to guide yourself towards your full potential, the way nature intended for you to live, and guide yourself to either or, to the new moon or the full moon. Sometimes I do just want to note that you could be staggered because you're headed into alignment, meaning you're moving your way through to the full moon or the new moon, to the red or the white. Definitely take note of what cycle you are so that you can learn to tap into the emotions and the powers that you have during this time. Like I said, moon rituals always help to move yourself in that direction, and spending your time with moonlight or dark new moon. Also, really quickly, I forgot to mention this. If you are no longer menstruating, or you do not, or you've had, you know, your uterus taken out, I want you to really understand that this is so important for you, because you are working with the phases directly with the moon. Just because you've had anything extracted, know that the energy is always there, always, always there. There's people that have had limbs removed, like their arms removed, and they can feel their arm itch. They can feel their arm tingle. It's energy and it's still there. So honor it. If you feel some type of way, like sad towards not having it, I would really like to invite you to mend that relationship, because it is so important. You are still cycling, and you're cycling with the moon. You're going through the phases with the moon. So you would be a white moon cycler. But if you are older, it's important to understand that you're moving towards your enchantress phase. So if you're no longer menstruating, you're also embodying some of the most powerful time of your overall timeline of your life. And we're going to get into that. And I think that's why all of this is so confusing, because there's so many layers to it. So if you have questions, just make sure that you're writing them down, and I'll get to them as soon as we get through this. So, you know, there's moon phases. I just want to talk really quickly about the moon phases themselves to get you comfortable with them. We have the new moon, which is the dark. It moves into, you know, crescent, first quarter, waxing, gibbous. So it's moving through all of these cycles. First quarter gibbous, and then gibbous again, third quarter crescent, and new. If you look up at the top, the first 2 weeks of the month we're waxing, or the first two weeks after the new moon starts, we're waxing, and then we go into full expansion, and then we're waning. So if you look at the cycle itself, waxing is the beginning of the expansion. We're starting to see the light come around. We're starting to see the light, and then we see the moon in its full potential. And then we're starting to see the dark come around. So that alone can tell you kind of where you should be with yourself, checking in with yourself. If you're moving towards expansion and being outward, or moving towards going inward. New moon. The new moon energy is tied to the cycle of death. And I just want to say death again, because I want us to get so comfortable with the dark that it doesn't even faze us, that we understand that this is a part of life and that there is so much power in death. Can you imagine if nothing ever died? Can you imagine if there was never a rebirth? If we didn't go through the phases? So the new moon is completely the cycle of death. So this is a dark time to go inward, to retreat. It's equivalent to the season of winter, a winter's season. It's aligned with it perfectly. And the phase that it identifies with is the wise woman phase. So this is, again, when you are your wisest. You're really going inward and learning about yourself. And tapping into the intuition. The waxing moon, which is the crescent, as we move through the phases, making our way towards the full moon. The waxing moon is the cycle of rebirth. It's the season of spring, and it is the energy of the virgin phase. The full moon is the cycle of growth. It's the season of summer, and it's the phase of the mother. The waning moon is the cycle of decline. It's the season of fall, and it's the phase of the enchantress or wild woman. And the reason I wanted to show you the moon phases and what the moon is going through is also so that you can physically see how everything is so interconnected. Like, it's not just about the moon cycle, it's not just about our moon cycle, but it's also about the seasons that take place within a year, and also the phases that we go through from beginning, from the time we're born to the time we die. Okay, so here's where we get to the good part, or the exciting part. There's 4 female archetypes. These archetypes, we have been learning about these archetypes since we were young, since we were little. The archetypes have been present in the archetypes have been present in so many movies, most especially any Disney princess movie. You will always find the 4 archetypes. They're crucial to the story. And it gave me the chills when I first heard this, because I was like, whoa, we've been through storytelling, energy has been trying to teach us about these 4 archetypes and how we can feel. Usually, like the evil queens are usually in their enchantress phase, or in the Snow White phase, we get to see, the crone at the end. She turns into the crone. Like, you will be able to identify these 4 archetypes if you look at any princess movie, any movie that is targeted for us. So as I mentioned, we not only embody the archetype throughout our entire lives, throughout the year, but we also embody those 4 archetypes throughout the month. So these 4 archetypes, or these 4 phases, they complete our cycle during the month. So the first phase, this is, forget about the moon at this point. Let the moon go, because I don't want us to stay focused on the moon, because some of us are not aligned to the moon, and so that doesn't matter. It doesn't mean that you still don't go through these phases. The only time I want you to take note of the moon is if you're no longer menstruating. Then that's when you know when you hit this phase. So the wise woman phase, again, this is the new moon, the new moon that was tied to death and to winter, okay? It's about going inward. This is when you are your wisest. You just went through a whole four weeks behind you of experience. You went through a whole week, 4 weeks of trials and tribulations. And this time in your life is when you know the most. This phase during the month is when you know the most, because you just went through the 4 weeks of trials and tribulations and wins and losses, and you can really look back and reflect, and then see how you're going to move forward. So this is a time of going inward, completely letting go of what does not serve you. Yes, take note of everything that you need to learn, but let go of the things that you can't change, and instead set intentions on how you feel you need to proceed. So it's a deep connection to intuition, and it is known to be one of the deepest times to connect with intuition. This is why there's a lot of belief that when men took away the red tents and men took away honoring this time in their life, they felt they needed to achieve the same power on their own, and the only way they could think of doing this was by, sacrificing animals and even humans in some cultures. So intention setting. So during your wise woman phase, when you're in your menstrual cycle, this is when you want to set intentions. Also, really quickly on the word menstrual, I just want to clarify this. I used to not use that word. I divorced myself from the word. I've since picked it back up because I think it's important to speak about the menstrual cycle in the word that was designated for it, in the same way that I like to use the word vagina and the word penis. I found that I needed to make peace with the word menstrual, and not align myself with the fact that there's men at the beginning of that word, but that actually menses is the root word of moon. So I've embraced that word again. Virgin phase. This is the next phase. This typically happens into when you are leaving your menstrual cycle. So when you start to spot towards the end, and when you stop spotting, this is typically when you enter the virgin phase. There's rebirth, a feeling of rebirth. It's spring, your pre-ovulation, and you're wanting to really go outward. There's new energy, and it's important to utilize this new energy to your favor. This is a great time to focus on details. So if you have an intention that you set, let's say you decided to write a book during your wise woman phase, then you would use the virgin phase to do all of the research on your book. Just to give you an idea of what I mean. It's all about you. It's all about like groundwork, research, executing intentions, but with all the detail that it needs, because your energy is hyperactive in details. You're taking in everything. It's just like a baby that is being born, and the baby's like looking around, like just, learning everything. That's the same type of energy that takes place during your virgin phase. So it's all about you, all about being completely selfish and using that energy for yourself. The next phase is the mother phase. Growth, summer. Also, you see the full moon up there. Like I said, I don't want us to get too attached to the full moon, but it's the same phase that the moon is in. This is a time where you're in ovulation, and this is the time where your energy is outward. It is empathetic, where you are wanting to teach, you're wanting to share, you're wanting to give. So for those that bled with the new moon, right now you're in your mother phase, I'm in your mother phase. It always aligns with me when I'm in my mother phase. I'm always holding circles, I'm always holding space. And it makes sense. It happens naturally, and it's my intuition already understanding the energy and working with the energy. You have a lot of energy during this time, so this is why it's important to use that time to share with others, because you don't want to use your energy when you're supposed to be conserving it for yourself. But right now you're in abundance of it, so it's a good time to share. Executing intentions. teamwork and creativity. This is a time to work collectively with other people to execute intentions that the collective might have, and brainstorm and just bring people into your space. This is the time to do it. Enchantress phase. This is the decline, the fall. This phase can be extremely difficult for a lot of us, more so even than the wise woman phase. The decline is the premenstrual phase, also known as the wild woman, the shaman, the inner healing, the inner healer, the ability to identify problems, being really short on patience, increasing subconscious awareness, having psychic abilities. So let me just go back here really quick. You're in inner healer mode. You're also really sensitive to energy, and you're identifying problems. These problems that you're identifying during this time are problems that you're getting clarity on from your mother phase, which was the last phase, and your virgin phase. So what didn't work, what worked, you're starting to feel here. If you didn't honor the virgin phase and the energy, let's say that here you started to execute energy of the enchantress and sharing yourself with people when you should have been focused on yourself, all of the repercussions to that, you're going to pay for them in the enchantress phase, and it's going to be difficult. And this is why a lot of the times we hate our menstrual cycles, because we don't understand how this energy works and we don't understand how to honor it. So understanding the phases gives you an important opportunity to also give yourself permission to say no. You know, give yourself permission to feel whatever it is that you're feeling and move through those feelings. So the enchantress phase is one of my favorite phases. It's also the phase where I do all of my healing. So I conserve a lot of my energy for my healings during my enchantress phase, and I've scheduled that strategically the way I schedule a lot of the things on my calendar. So why is this information important? We've been talking about that throughout this whole thing. This is a key one. The energy rules your house. Like this dynamic, these phases, they rule your house and they rule your family. So it's also, I think, important for men to know this information. They don't have to be pros at it like we do, but I think they need to understand what's coming and what's leaving. I think that's why we've started to see a big increase of men listening to Let There Be Luz, because they're trying to understand the energy, and I appreciate that. It affects the men in our home. If they begin to understand what phase you're going through and what is needed and what is expected, then it's important to attune to it, because you can resist it and you'll find yourself in a lot of in an unhealthy dynamic, I would say, because we don't perform the way men perform. We go through these very important phases for very specific reasons, because we're moving through creating and letting go, creating and letting go. We have ecosystems in our bodies. Like what we're capable of doing is really important, and it's also equally important to our partners that don't menstruate, that identify as man, or that simply don't menstruate. So understanding of your phases brings harmony. It brings a deeper connection to self. You can move through life a lot easier. Give yourself permission to cry or have that piece of chocolate if you need to. And you're in much more harmony because you're being compassionate and understanding of what self needs. Not seeking direction outside of ourselves. This is so key, because you have the wise woman that you can tap into, and she's with you for an entire week or 4 days or however long it is that she's with you. And this is the time to seek yourself and not necessarily seek outside of yourself, which, as you guys know, if you listen to the podcast, this is one of the most important tools or that I like to teach is that it's important to trust yourself, because if you are solely dependent on, you know, the information that comes from other people, or even permission to do things that comes from other people, whether they like it or they hate it, you're going to be in constant conflict with what you're supposed to do in this lifetime. It also builds trust with yourself. When you start to understand all of these 4 phases, you start to really understand yourself, and you can get to a place where you're much more confident and you're able to trust what your intuition is telling you, hold your space, and draw boundaries. And of course, you're becoming the best version of yourself. So you're coming into your full self. And I can tell you, as someone that discovered this when I was 36 years old, at such a late point in my life, I can tell you, I thought that I was already hella spiritual and I had already done all of this work. But for me personally, there was nothing that compared to understanding myself and who I am during these 4 phases. And I 100% can attest that I feel that I'm absolutely becoming the best version of myself, without a doubt. So what are your next steps? If you're learning for this for the first time, or you're getting a refresher, these are some great steps. They're just stuff that I'm offering. You don't have to do all of them. It's just some offerings. Download a moon app, get familiar with the moon phases, know where the moon is, and also in correlation with you. Track your cycle if you're not tracking it already. If you track, then and you're new to this, go back and see what you are aligning with, any patterns that you can identify. When I first came into this, when I first started this knowledge, I went back and I looked at my Instagram account to see kind of the weeks I was in, and I was seeing that my content that I was creating was completely aligned to the phases I was going with, including being hella emotional during the enchantress phase. I mean, I was seeing these patterns so clearly. Keep your journal. Keep a journal for your emotions week by week. Kind of learn to see where you're transitioning. Also, this isn't a time to be quote unquote positive. This is a time to be completely honest. I think so many misconceptions come from, you know, trying to manifest and live a positive life. Yes, that's the goal. Yes, that's what we want to move towards. But let's be honest with ourselves. That's not always possible. And trying to mask positive energy with something that's going on that's, you know, negative, that's deep down inside, is not going to help you. It's only going to make the negative energy expand until it pushes through. So it's so important to really honor what you're going through and move yourself through those vibrations to get yourself into a positive vibrations, but don't mask them. Okay, identify when your transitions are from phase to phase. Just know that it's not a solid week, that you're not going through these phases for a solid week. Your enchantress phase can be 3-4 days. Your wise woman can be, you know, 3 or 4 days or 6 days. And your virgin and your mother phase can be a little over 7. So just find out where you are transitioning. Honor each phase. This is the ultimate way of self-care. I cannot say that enough. We have to honor these phases because they will allow for us to manifest, execute, and receive and let go of so much easier. I'm actually going to write that down. Manifest, execute, receive, and let go. Also, when I say manifest in the beginning, I want you to know that when you're in a state of manifesting, of setting your intentions, it's living as if it is already here, because it is. The intention is already in time and in space. And so you have to live as if it is manifested. And then take what you have learned and reflect it on your personal work calendar. Yeah, so take your phases and, you know, apply it. Like if you're going to have a family vacation, make sure you're doing that while you're ovulating. Make sure you're doing that when you want to spend time inward. If you're going on a girls' trip, I would say make sure you're doing that when you're in the virgin phase, because you're feeling yourself. You're in all kinds of mode, you know? So it's just important to take all of that energy and utilize it to your fullest potential, most especially when running your own business or running your home business. Like you're the CEO of your household, running the way your home is unraveling itself or raveling itself. Any questions so far on any of these phases? You can unmute yourself. Everyone is muted right now. So if you want to unmute yourself, that way I can hear you speak. And I just want you to remember we're in a safe space. All right, so if you can unmute yourself and go ahead and ask a question. Yvette?
Hi.
Hi.
Hold on one. Hello.
Hi.
I have a really crazy question.
Okay.
I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. So I started listening to the moon cycle phase like end of April into the beginning of May. And up until that point, I was always a red moon cycler. But I'd never really thought about how it was to track it and how to go through this process. So I was waiting for my cycle for the first time, like really excited because I was going to go through all these motions. And in May, I never got my period. And I still have not had my period. In June, I spotted a little bit and I was like, oh, okay, here it is. But it was just like maybe a day or two.
And you're
I
definitely pregnant.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
I checked like everything, even though I'm not like on birth control or anything, like, but I don't know if you ever heard of this happening to anybody or.
So here's what came up right away is I'm wondering if you are feeling, I know you're excited. I'm wondering if there's any part of you that feels fear of what you're going to have to hold yourself accountable for now that you have this information. And if there's a deeper part of you that's like resisting the expansion or what can potentially come if this is, if this is real, like you're putting it to the test, right? You're wanting to go through the phases. So I'm wondering if deep down in your core, there's a little bit of fear of what you're going to have to execute now that you know this. I don't know if that's resonating with you. If it is, or if it isn't, it's just what my intuition told me right off the bat. But I do, obviously, I want to encourage you to spend some time tonight under the full moon as much as possible. I don't know what your schedule looks like, or where you live, like where you're located. But if you're really wanting to like let this go, I think this is the best exercise for you to do on this full moon is to really dig deeper and see what's happening. What is being blocked there that you're not wanting to face, and let it go. Maybe that's your offering to the moon of like letting this go. You're ready to receive. You understand it's going to be scary and you're okay with being scared, but you want to receive what you're supposed to be receiving in these next phases. I would also like to invite you to maybe get to a park if you can tonight. Obviously, make sure you're safe. I don't want you into any trouble or anything like that. But if you're with nature and with the full moon together, it's like next level powerful. I had a full moon hike when I first started. It was one of my first events. And the women that had gone that hadn't menstruated, that were facing menstruation like issues, 3 of them started bleeding the very next day. And I know it's because we spent all the time hiking. We spent like 2 hours under the full moon. So I would like to invite you to do that.
Thank you.
Sure. And then there was a question on the chat about what moon app is good. So I just have like a regular moon app. Let me show you the one I have on my phone. It's just, all it is it's called Moon. And I don't know if you can see it, but it just tells me like what time, based on my location, what time the moon is going to become full. Yeah, so I hope that helps. And do we have any other questions? Just, yeah, I see you, Christina. Go ahead.
Hey, Linda.
Hey, how are you?
Good. I did for the first time segment all my cycle. I took notes. I went back and I listened to the 4 cycles, because you're right, we have to listen to the podcast again. And then I took notes and I opened up the Word document right now just to continue to add notes to it. And then I literally went through the week and I scheduled all my meetings on the dates to coordinate with. And I've been paying really close attention to it. And I have this whole week I've been feeling productive. It's like I'm doing the thing. I'm now wondering, my question is, how do you know when, if we're around other women, how much their energy, according to their menstruation and their cycles, how is that impacting us? And how do we know the difference?
That is such a good question, Christina. I've never even thought of that. But you know what? The first thing that came to me is alpha females. They're dominating. So this is what's coming right now. So if you are around alpha females and their energy, or if you are an alpha female, then you are not as affected. Who's affected is like those that don't identify themselves as alpha. So, that's what I would think. If they are menstruating and not on pills or anything like that. But that's why before and other times it was so important to or not in other times, but I think in this time, that's why it is so important for us to spend time with the moon and acknowledge it and be under the full moon or under the new moon, because then that's the power that's going to affect us the most. So it's almost like cleansing yourself under the moon from other people's energies that's not serving you. So that's how I would think we would gain our power back. Maybe I would suggest going under the full moon and calling yourself back, like call myself back from all times and all places. It's always good, but it was such a great question. I never even thought of that.
Yeah, it's only because I was the one that asked the question about how do we rid ourselves of energy. Mm-hmm. And so I'm really working on that, on honing that part. And so I want to kind of make sure that, to the best of my ability, that I'm understanding and I'm doing everything I can to.
Yeah. And what's crazy about that too is like, if you're in your mother phase and you're hanging out with someone in your wise woman phase, like how much energy is cross penetrating. And I would assume a lot of it. I think that's why cutting cords is important, and centering yourself. Yeah. Good question. I feel like I have to do that more.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat. Have you ever heard of people stuck in a phase? I feel a little stuck in enchantress phase. Okay, this is a really good question because this brings me to something else. I wanted to talk about not only the phases that we're in throughout the seasons, like we're also taking in that energy. So right now we're in the summer phase. So I feel like when we're in summer, that's the mother phase. And we're in our mother phase in our menstrual cycle, that's the phase that kind of shines. That's the time where the mother phase is like on fleek. That week in your menstrual cycle, and same for each of the other phases. So you're saying you feel a little stuck in your enchantress phase. I'm wondering if you are meaning like you're tapping into psychic abilities, if you're feeling, can you just elaborate for me a little bit so I can have a little more context? Because you're definitely moving through the phases, but is there a gift that you might have that that is part of the enchantress phase that you're not receiving, that you're not allowing, that you're like resisting, you're pushing up against it? So you're like, that's supposed to be in the enchantress phase, but it's actually a gift that you have that you're supposed to embrace. I would be curious to know that. So next question. Okay, so let me see. Yes, just a little stagnant, feeling that irritation. Okay, so this is really important that you're feeling that irritation. If you remember, I mentioned that if you're not honoring the phases, it kind of throws you off. So it's kind of like a domino effect. Like you don't honor one phase, you drop the next phase, and so on and so forth, and so on and so forth. You have a clean slate. You always have a clean slate. Make sure you're utilizing that clean slate while you're menstruating, and tap into assessing where you're not happy, because you're irritated because there's something that you're not dealing with in depth. So when you're irritated and people trigger you or people irritate you, it's because they're showing you something that you need to work on. So that trigger is key. That trigger is really important because that's what's going to direct you inward so that you can do the work. So I would definitely like to invite you to do that. And remember that you have death and rebirth, so I need to honor phases. Yeah, you need to honor your phases. You got it. Okay, so our next question is, how do we track our period? I feel like I PMSed for 2 weeks, then I could bleed for a couple of days. My period has always been all over the place, always. Well, have you used an app, Addie? I'm curious to see if you've used an app, because I haven't found an app that I love for my period. I have one that I use. I'm not in love with it, so I wouldn't really recommend it. I'm still trying to find the right one for me. But if you track, like mine allows you to say I've menstruated for 2 weeks. So it'll allow you to record that. Never used an app. Yeah, definitely get an app. That's the best one to use. Christina says MyFlow is a good one. She likes that one. And someone else mentioned Period Tracker on iPhone. Clue. I've heard a lot of really great things about Clue. I need to try that one. That one keeps coming up over and over. Just to make sure I understand, if we are red moon cyclers, we go through the same cycles in order, just not the same time as a moon. This is a great question, Fabiola. Thank you, because I forgot to mention this. You can kind of ignore the moon cycle, to the sense that you're not phasing with the moon. The moon is going through its phases. You're going through different phases. But what's happening here is that there's a center point of attraction. There's a direct reflection. Women that are cycling with the moon, the vision I just got right now is that the moon is shining this way, and we're like in front of the moon shining this way too. So all of it, so white moon cycles and the moon are shining this way. What's happening with the red moon cycle, the vision I get is that you're face to face with the moon. So there's very little information on red moon cyclers. Number one, because it's not as common, and most women are almost always white moon. So for me personally, I go 6 months white moon, and then I go 6 months red. And that's my pattern. So there's not only is there the pattern of like what moon cycler are you can expand even further. And after years of tracking, you can find new patterns within the whole moon cycle, white moon or red moon system. So for you, it is said that when you're on your period, it's not the same as when the white moon cycler is on your period. Yes, you need time to go inward, but you're also very aggressive during this time. So you have the energy of the full moon coming at you, and you know, full moon, lunatic, it makes people crazy. It's a lot of energy. So, you know, that's why, you know, werewolves and all of those tales, they came from, you know, the full moon and the energy that it gives. So during this time, it's still important to go inward. It's still important to set your intentions, but you can be extra aggressive. You have aggressive energy during this time. So I would suggest having business meetings where you need to be hard and you need to be aggressive, scheduling those business meetings during this time. This is why it is so important for you to journal how you're feeling, most especially if you're a red moon cycler, because your experience is completely different than what is mostly researched. For me personally, when I'm on the red moon cycle and I first start it, I fucking suffer for the first and into the second month. My emotions are all over the place. I don't know if I'm a wise woman or a mother, you know, like, I don't know where I'm at. It's so important for me to journal. And then I slowly get into the phases and the wave of those phases. It's going to be slightly different for you. There's going to be different areas in your life, different areas in the phases. And it's going to be up to you to identify those.
Can I ask something?
Yes. Yeah.
So you mentioned earlier that you were going to talk about tips, and maybe I missed it, on how to go from red moon to white.
Yeah. So I did mention it in the slide, but it's okay. We can go over it again. So here's the thing. You're wanting to, I don't recommend, well, unless you're trying to conceive. Is that what's happening? Are you trying to conceive?
I am, but I'm currently red moon. I knew I was going to get my period because, you know, the moon. So I was like, I know this is going to happen, but I don't ovulate. It's weird. It's like it's aligned with it, but like it's not really a period. Because I have PCOS, so it's like it'll come and it just won't. But it always aligns to a moon when it comes. So
yeah. So my tips, if you're wanting to leave, can I ask why you want to leave that phase?
Well, I mean, I don't want to get pregnant now, but like maybe at the end of the year or like next year.
Yeah.
We'd like to start trying.
So what I feel like, what my intuition is asking me to tell you is to really honor that you're in the red moon phase, because I feel like it's going to be really important and key to what's going to happen next. So don't divert from where you are. Don't try to like book your phase. Like, don't try to piece out of it, because it's an important part of what you're going through right now.
Okay.
So my tips are more for women that don't align with any of the moons, that are trying to find themselves into a phase. And also, of course, if someone is really looking to conceive, then there's exercises that I recommend if they're in the red moon phase. Finding trouble conceiving, meaning they already started trying, but they're having a hard time conceiving. Then there's exercises like spending time outside with communing with the new moon. Like the new moon is really important to commune with during that time. But I just feel like you're supposed to be embracing what is and not resisting it.
Okay. I mean, I'm not, yeah, I don't really feel like pressure or anything. We're not like, okay, we're going to start. But yeah, I was just curious about that.
And then also, let me tell you that there are very many powerful babies born from red moon mothers.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay. So this is typically advice for someone that has tried and can't to align because of the energy that the full moon has. But women that are on the red moon still can get pregnant, and staggered women can still get pregnant. But I've heard amazing things from babies that are born from red moon bleeders. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let me see where we were with the questions. Okay. I lost where I am, so I'm just going to pick up wherever. Okay, guys. If I don't ask your question, feel free to unmute yourself and interrupt and chime in. To bathe in full moon, do you actually have to be in full view of the moon? I live around a lot of buildings and my balcony doesn't get view of the moon. So I would strongly suggest, Sonia, I think the full moon is like so energetic that we can be inside our home. I mean, I know the moon is so powerful that it can give us its power from being inside our homes. But I definitely think that there is something really special and valuable from staring at the moon, from gazing into the moon. In the same way that we've heard a lot of positive things about gazing into the sun when the sun is setting and the sun is rising, not when it's at its full power. But in that same way, I really feel like there's a lot of benefits from moon gazing and receiving the light directly without being obstructed. So maybe a little walk around the building really quick with the dog to check and see where the moon is. But if you can't, going outside is still better than being inside. I used to be in white moon, but as I got older, I became more red moon. Could it be that getting into my 30s, I'm embracing it more? My transition really started when I was in the military. Okay, so yes. You used to be white moon, and as you're getting older, this is very common. It is very common for us to move into a more red moon cycle as we age because, I think it has also to do with like the energy. Let's go back to going into the red tent and thinking of the women that are the healers and the shamans. They're gaining more experience with themselves. They're coming into their full selves, so they're tapping into that power. So yes, I think it's really common. Definitely embracing it more, definitely tapping into that full power, and also never being scared that you can't have a baby or anything like that. I don't want that topic to come up because I just feel it come up in my heart, because women can still, create babies during this time. Okay, so I started noticing once I became a leader in uniform, I would feel when, okay, so the question continues, I think. Uniform, I started noticing once I became a leader in uniform, I would feel when my soldiers' wives were pregnant and the sex of the baby. Yeah, I mean, I think that, that has to do with moving towards your psychic abilities, your intuitive. So I think that experience is a gift. And a lot of the times those gifts are really indicative of how we're cycling. And sometimes they're not, but most of the time they are. So it sounds like you have a gift. So definitely embrace the gift.
Linda, I have a question.
Yes.
You've talked about being pulled into the white moon cycle. What do you feel? Like, what do you go through from going from like the red moon to the white moon?
Sure. Let me turn on the light real quick because I feel like it's getting dark in here. Hold on a second. So for me, being pulled away from the white moon cycle was very emotional, a lot of crying, a lot of feeling confused, a lot of feeling like isolated, a lot of like isolated, alone, lonely. That's kind of what I felt, was like, oh my gosh, I'm leaving what I know. I'm leaving my comfort zone and I'm being pushed into this other space that I'm not quite comfortable with. Like I said, it's also like a duality when you're in the red moon, when you're a red moon cycle. So like not experiencing the sweet phases of the moon and having to kind of be in duality with it was really hard for me personally.
Now, physically, did you experience anything physically? Or was it just like more emotional? And because it's like, for me, I was supposed to be going through my moon cycle right now, but I don't feel that. I don't feel like I'm supposed to, I guess.
Okay.
Go through my cycle.
So you're supposed to be bleeding right now, and you're not?
No.
Okay, you're not. It didn't come. So you're late?
Well, just I guess by today, I don't know.
Yeah, and you don't feel like it's coming?
No, I don't feel like I'm there, like I should be.
Is this your first time in the space of the red moon?
It's my third.
It's your third.
Yes.
So I want you to remember that you could, because you're in these are great questions, especially from women in the red moon cycle, because we can learn a lot from this. So remember that you're receiving a lot of energy from the moon. So you're in duality. So you're receiving energy from the moon. Once I got comfortable after leaving my white moon going into the red, I embraced all the energy that was coming. And I didn't feel the sadness that I felt when normally menstruating because of all the energy that I'm receiving from the moon. That's why I'm saying that if you're a red moon cycler and you have like an aggressive business meeting that you need to take, you remember you're in your full power, you're bleeding, you're a wise woman. So imagine a wise woman going out in the full moon, making deals. You're not feeling that the soul decline that you feel when you're a white moon, because you're not in death mode with the moon. The moon is fully alive and awake right now. And so that is such powerful energy to go out and like close deals, because right now you're a monster in all good sense of the word monster.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that might be why you don't feel anything, so to say.
Yeah, it's just nothing. Like I usually I go into myself and I feel depressed. I feel like I want to be alone. But right now,
so you're fully embraced. Yeah, so you're fully now. So you've been transitioning, even though for 3 months you've been bleed, but now you're fully there. You're there. Okay. And like from you, we can learn so much, like being there, because how are you feeling? You don't have to agree to the phases. Because you're in the red moon cycler. So this is a phase that like I said, there's hardly any research, hardly any documentation on. So it's important to share like no, I feel great. I feel empowered. I'm feeling, you know, whatever it is that you're feeling, take note of that. But thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Good.
Thank you.
Are there categories that you suggest to journal? Can you elaborate a little bit more on that question in terms of categorizing? I think obviously there's like, you know, no, I'm not going to try to understand the question. If you can just elaborate on categories so I can help.
I have a question.
Yes.
So, I started menstruating yesterday, and I was really excited. I did the little video because I had only been listening to you for the last month. But my question is, I feel like I'm menopausing,
Okay.
and I have a daughter. She's 8, whom I feel is going to be starting soon. And from everything that we've been taught as we were younger, or not taught really, I want to do it right for her.
Yeah.
So I guess that's my question. I'm sorry, I'm getting emotional.
Emotional too. I'm getting emotional too.
Because it's such right now, because of what you've said and what I've been researching, it's such a beautiful stage to be in that I want it to be a good experience for her.
Yeah.
And how can I do that?
Sure. So I get emotional because that was the number one reason why I started the podcast and why I wanted to share this information, was because yes, for us, yes, but more so for them, for them, so that they wouldn't have to grow up with my experience of hating it and all of the things that are so wrong. So for what I would like to suggest for you is having a little ceremony, having a ceremony of sorts, making it really special in however way your intuition is telling you to make it special. I would say, maybe it's a really nice candlelit dinner. Maybe it's a candlelit dinner and you guys go get your nails done. And maybe after she stops menstruating, like when it's over, when she's in her virgin phase, definitely maybe having a spa day, but doing something that really brings her into like, you have so many gifts have just been bestowed upon you. You have a really big responsibility to honor yourself. And maybe it's also teaching her about, the phases. But that's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm so excited for her and for you, because you get to relive this experience via her and in a healthy way.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I look forward to it too. Thank you.
Yes, and I'm currently working on a top secret project that is going to help you, but it's not here fast enough. So I'll give birth to the project quick and it'll help. But
thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay, so I think I've answered all the questions. Oh, let me see. Interested in how I can prepare for menopause, which I know is kind of sad to be approaching. No, Sonia, it's opposite of sad. It's completely opposite of sad, because you're leaving your mother phase. And guess what you're entering? Like from your lifespan, you're leaving your mother phase and you're entering your enchantress phase. Like, think about how powerful that phase is, and to get to fully embody it and walk into it in your life is really, really powerful. So I definitely don't want you to feel sadness. I want you to explore feeling excited for all the power that's going to come once you enter this enchantress phase and what you can tap into. Remember, it's heading into the decline. So of course it's sad, of course all of those feelings, but what you have the potential to uncover is so much bigger. And embracing those powers and embracing that space is so important for so many of us that are going to also be headed into that direction soon. Christina, your vision is correct. Okay, so I want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. Am I considered a white moon cycle if I start bleeding a few days before or after the first night of the new moon? Or does it have to be? No, you're right. You're right, Vidi. So you are a white moon cycler if you menstruate in and around the new moon. It doesn't have to be completely synced. It doesn't have to be on that day, just in and around. Same thing for the red moon cycler, in and around the full moon. Doesn't have to be on that specific day. You're right. Hi, Esmeralda. I started on Friday and finished today. Yes, so yes, she's asking if she's a red moon cycler, if she started on Friday and finished today. That's correct. You are definitely a red moon cycler. All right, are there any other questions? No? Okay. All right.
Linda.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
I have a question.
Yes.
My mom says that her mom used to say to not like take baths, like only showers when you're on your period. Do you know anything about that?
I do. Well, I mean, what I know is that that's a very common thought. It's very like ancient that and it's not just like ancient, it's like something that we should definitely honor, to not bathe during that time. I don't exactly understand why. In the things that I read, no one really said why. And intuitively also for me, it feels a little weird. The shower feels a little better. I don't know if it can potentially, like, I don't know if, I'm not sure. I know that in some cases we can reverse our flow. So I don't know if it has anything with reversing our flow. But I would definitely honor that. I like to celebrate like leaving menstruation by taking a bath.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Oh, I see a hand raised. Yvette? No? Okay.
Well, I'll ask it just to kind of piggyback on hers.
Sure.
But how does that go with, like, I've heard and I've experienced also, when you are on your period and you do go into a body of water, that the flow kind of stops. Do you know anything about that?
So that's what I'm thinking. I don't know anything about it, but that's what I'm thinking intuitively. That's why I know that we can reverse our flow. So meaning like the blood goes up into our ovaries and we start, that's happened to me once before. It's the most awful pain. I had to go into emergency room and we just found out that I was bleeding in like opposite. So I can't remember if I was swimming or if that was attributed to water when that happened to me. It happened years ago, but I know that that happens. And so that's why I'm wondering if that's part of the reason, if we can reverse it by being in water, like if something happens there coming in contact with the water. But I don't know for sure. I don't know for sure. I'm sure there has to be something on Google. We should ask the Google gods.
Thank you.
Any other questions? No? All right, so this concludes our, oh wait, do you have any comments about how tampons affect our cycles? Yes, stop using a tampon. Stop, 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 stop. Stop. really, 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 from the bottom of my heart, I hate to impose like things on other people, but two things I know for sure is like hormonal birth control and tampons are not good for our body. So the tampons themselves and pads, guys, and pads, they're bleached. The cotton is bleached and the cotton has pesticides. There is, like, if you do enough research, PCOS and endometry, I'm sorry, please excuse my ignorance on those, on how to say those two, or you know, the knowledge behind them, but ovarian cancer, all of those things, they can be tied to a specific chemical, and the highest concentrate of that chemical is in the pesticides that they use to bleach the cotton. So that we're literally putting the most harmful pesticide that exists in the planet inside our fucking vagina. So you want to like think about how deep this is, like how deeply rooted it is to cause harm to women's bodies. Like, let's stop and think of how the most harmful pesticide, and they can't tell us why we have fibroids. They can't give us any answers when it comes to our reproductive system. It pisses me off. So 100%, like if I can share anything, it's to please stop using tampons, stop using pads. I would love, also, we're like those tampons can only hold a certain amount of liquid. So what we're doing is we're reversing our periods. What's happening is that we're flooding over and the blood is going out through our fallopian tubes into our ovaries, and it's expelling out into our systems. So potentially a lot of us can have like dirty blood into our systems that's creating a whole slew of other problems. I transitioned into the cup, I want to say about 2 years ago. I haven't looked back. And now my body's telling me to not even use the cup. But I would like to suggest that everyone uses the cup, get to that place first, and then get to like slowly transition. I think the cup is so much more better than tampons. And also consider, you know, Thinx or any type of period underwear, or a reusable pad, a reusable, you know, like a, shoot, what's the name of that? It's just like reusable pads that you can find on the internet. But yes, that I stand by that wholeheartedly. And I do have an episode on that as well, like the dangers of tampons, and I break it down even further, and I list all the resources that gave me that information. So you can take a look at that there. Any other questions? Let me see. When you bleed, okay, so when you bleed, it's not the mother phase. When you bleed, it's the wise woman phase. And the next phase, so let me just go over it really quick again. It's when you're menstruating, it's the wise woman phase. The next phase after that is the virgin phase. And the next phase after that is the mother phase. And the next phase after that is, again, the enchantress phase. So it's wise, virgin, mother, enchantress, back around to wise. And then again, all of this is also in the podcast. So you can listen to it on the podcast. All right. All right. I'll take more questions if you have one. If not, then we'll go ahead and close out this workshop. No? Okay. Okay. I just had my period at the top of the month. Am I in my mother phase? Yes, you are in your mother phase. Right now, you're giving, you're loving, you're wanting to help your friends, you're all the things. But Zoila, I feel like you're always in your mother phase. You're always giving and always loving. That's your gift. Love you all so much. Thank you so much for joining this workshop. I hope that it helps you on your journey. I'm always available for questions via Patreon. We also have a Q&A next month. So not next month, I'm sorry. Our Q&A is scheduled next week where you can ask any questions. If you have more questions about the Moon Cycle series, feel free to ask me there. I'll be sending out information on our Q&A next week. I think I'm gonna turn it in, oh shoot, no. I was gonna say I might turn it into a happy hour, but I'm fasting. Happy water hour will make it. So I love you all so much. Thank you for your contribution to Patreon. You all sustain me to the OGs from the OG times. I love you all so much. To the new girls, I love you so much as well. Thank you so much for trusting me on this journey, for jumping onto Patreon. I hope that you receive benefits from it. I hope that it helps you along your spiritual journey. Thank you. Have a good evening.